Imagine closing on your dream condo. You did everything right. You got the inspection, you negotiated the price, you moved in, and you love it. But then months later, you get a letter in the mail, and it's a special assessment. The Homeowners Association says you now owe $12,000, and it's due in 90 days. That's not a hypothetical situation, and this scenario isn't uncommon. Unfortunately, it happens even to people who thought they did their homework. Today, we're walking through two Madison condos. Both of these condos have received offers by the time of this video being posted, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about how homeowners associations, otherwise known as HOAs, and what to do in the event that your HOA becomes problematic. Let's put it that way. So whether you're buying a condo right now, you already own one, or you want to understand what you'd be getting into when it comes to owning a condo, then this video is for you. Hi, my name is Hannah Garcia, and this is my channel, Heartland Homes with Hannah. I'm a licensed realtor in both Wisconsin and Illinois, and check the description below to get in touch with me for all of your real estate needs. All right, let's just get right into it. So the first property I'm going to be giving you a tour of is a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo here on the east side of Madison, Wisconsin, built in 2005. The layout is efficient, the finishes are clean, and the HOA dues cover a lot in the building. Parking, hot water, water and sewage, trash, snow removal, common area maintenance, and access to a fitness center and a hot tub. On paper, that's real value here for this 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit. The unit itself is genuinely appealing, and that's exactly the point. Most of the time with condos, you have to look at the actual condo documents to find any potential issues. So let's break down some common issues buyers might face when looking for a new condo. Every HOA is supposed to set aside money, not just for today's expenses, but for tomorrow's repairs as well. That savings account is called the reserve fund. This should cover everything that the HOA is responsible for, which is pretty much anything that isn't within the unit itself. So when the roof wears out, elevators break, parking structures crack, the reserve fund is there to cover these issues. And with any building, repairs aren't a question of if they'll be needed, it's a question of when. And when that moment comes, the reserve fund is either there or it isn't. So here's a rough estimate of what to look for when evaluating a condo. If the reserve fund is at 70% funded or higher, you have reasonable confidence that the association is planning ahead. If the reserve fund is below 50%, that's a yellow flag. Below 30%, that's a hard stop until you understand why it's that low. Now let me show you what underfunded could look like in practice. When I pull the reserve fund information on a property, I'm looking to see if there's a gap between what's saved and what's needed for identified repairs. It's a major red flag if there's a significant gap between what's saved in the reserve fund and what's needed to cover the cost of any identified repairs. And it gets even worse if the HOA has already had to take out substantial loans to fund repairs that the reserve couldn't cover. That loan carries annual payments that are built directly into the budget, which means unit owners may ultimately feel the cost of that loan through increased HOA dues or special assessments over time. That's not a number you find by simply looking or touring a unit. That's something you find when you dig deeper into the associated documents that accompany the condo when you're looking to buy it. Before you even consider making an offer, your realtor should be looking into all of the HOA documents and financials and going over those documents with you. When your realtor gets these documents for you, here are 3 things you should look for. Number 1, is the operating budget balanced? In an unbalanced budget, expenses are outpacing the income. In other words, the HOA dues that owners pay aren't fully covering current costs, let alone there aren't going to be enough to build reserves for the future. Number 2, what's the reserve balance versus the actual need? We were talking a little bit about that gap earlier in the video, but when the number in the reserve account is a fraction of what the building actually needs in order to address repairs, that mismatch is your risk exposure. It shows you what the likelihood could be that you might have special assessments on the horizon. And number 3, are there unusual line items? If repairs and maintenance costs are exceptionally high, that can signal a building that is in a heavy repair cycle. If capital expense spending is already well underway, legal fees can sometimes indicate disputes or add complexity. So it's something that I think is unusual, and unusual line items are always something to look further into before deciding if you want to put an offer on a property. So now let's talk about what might be a red flag when looking at a condo that you're considering putting an offer on. Low reserves, red flag. An operating deficit, red flag. Legal fees, red flag. And now here's one that most buyers miss entirely. But something I personally pay very close attention to is whether there's future special assessments that are already listed in the budget. Not as potential, not as a maybe, but are already planned and already in writing for the upcoming year. It's even more of a red flag if that special assessment range is a large range. That changes the entire cost calculation for a buyer. Your monthly dues tell you one number, but the true cost of owning in a condo building is entirely different and takes all of these things that we've been talking about into consideration. Let's talk about special assessments. So special assessments are something that happens when an HOA needs money beyond what the HOA dues cover, and they pass that bill directly onto the unit owners. It arrives outside of your mortgage, outside of your monthly dues, and in Wisconsin, under the Condominium Ownership Act, if you don't pay the special assessment, the HOA can actually place a lien on your property. So this is a real legal exposure and not just a technicality. Another thing I advise looking into when reviewing an HOA is whether or not there are any notes indicating some kind of delinquency, whether it be both on HOA dues or special assessments. When there are owners in a building that can't keep up with what's being asked of them financially by the HOA, the burden doesn't disappear, and in some cases, when there are delinquencies, it can create additional financial pressure within the association, and that pressure can be passed off to other owners. One more thing to look out for is whether or not there's a management transition, meaning that the property management responsibilities are passing from one management company to another management company. And whenever there is a transition in management, or really a transition of any kind in life, there's always potential for that transition to be disorganized and have ongoing work when it comes to cleaning up records and systems. And I want to be fair here. Management transitions happen, and working through one doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with the building or the association. But when you're looking at multiple large-scale projects, like any potential repairs, structural work, or exterior updates happening around at the same time, a management transition on top of all of that can add real uncertainty to an already complex picture. So if you're living in Wisconsin and you want a realtor who does this deep dive document review as a standard part of the buying process, not just as an afterthought, then check the link in the description to set up a free consultation with me. And when it's time to sell, I bring that same level of preparation to your listings too. So before we move on, one thing that I want to mention, because it is really important when you're living in a place that has an HOA, but when you buy a condo in Wisconsin, you become a member of the Homeowners Association, which means you get to vote on super important things like who's on the board of directors, what's the budget, how is money being spent, how is the building being managed, where is the money going. You have the power to vote on those things. And most owners never show up to the vote. And in a building that's navigating complex and compounding financial decisions, the people who aren't in the room when those decisions are being made and don't show up to vote are still fully affected by everything that gets decided. So I highly recommend read the meeting minutes that are provided by the association before you put in an offer on anything. They're usually part of the disclosure package, and they'll tell you way more about the HOA's culture, its challenges, than any financial spreadsheet will. All right, let's tour the second property here. Our second property is at Harbor House Condominiums on Madison's west side. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, just over 1,100 square foot, first floor corner unit with southeast exposure. It has a wood-burning fireplace in the living room, new furnace, new water heater, new in-unit washer and dryer, 2 heated underground parking stalls, and a private storage unit. It has an outdoor pool, a hot tub, a sauna, fitness center, tennis and basketball courts, and for the price point and on the west side of Madison, these fundamentals are very strong. And another thing I really like about this property is that Harbor House has its own community website, and their board meetings are open to all residents by policy. That's not a universal thing for condos to be doing. And a board that communicates transparently and welcomes owners to their meetings creates a fundamentally different environment than one that operates behind closed doors. It's a great cultural signal, and it's one that's worth noting. Of course, that doesn't mean that Harbor House is perfect or that you should ever skip doing your due diligence, because every HOA requires the same level of careful review. But transparency is very meaningful when considering purchasing a condo. Now, here's something I want to sit with for a minute, because it applies to whether you're about to buy a condo or if you've owned one for years. A well-managed HOA today does not guarantee a well-managed HOA tomorrow. Boards change, management companies change. And as we just talked about, transitions can get complicated. When engaged owners stop coming to HOA meetings, then gradually the people making the decision about how your building's money is being spent are people you've never met and have never voted for. That's how you get a situation where there's large repairs, deferred maintenance, and all the problems keep compounding over the years. So if you already own a condo, I want you to honestly ask yourself, when's the last time you read your building's financials? Do you know your reserve fund percentage right now? Have you attended a board meeting in the last year? Those are all tools that protect you. Reading the documents, showing up, and using your vote. Those don't expire at closing. And if you're not using them, you're trusting that everything is going to keep being fine. And that might be true, but it's not a reliable way to protect yourself. So if you own a condo in Wisconsin or Illinois and you want a second opinion on what your HOA documents might be saying, or if you're thinking about selling and you want to know what your HOA's financial health and how that may affect your listing price and your buyer pool, reach out to me. I can help you understand all of that. And this is the point I really want you to take away. Every condo can have completely different risk profiles that you may or may not ever know just by touring the property. This is something that you absolutely should look into a little deeper if you're considering putting in an offer on any property. You can always repaint the walls, but you cannot repaint a depleted reserve fund. So if you've already purchased a condo and you've been living there, here are a few things that you should watch out for and take into consideration. Number 1, do dues increase without a written explanation? Number 2, maintenance that keeps getting deferred. So the same leak, the same parking issue, the same maintenance problem that isn't getting addressed. Keep an eye out for that. Number 3, the same repair keeps coming up in conversation with your neighbors, and it never quite gets done. 4, financial statements that stop arriving on schedule or that you have to chase down to receive. Number 5, board meetings that go quiet or where quorum can't be reached. None of these things alone is a crisis, but if you're living somewhere and you start to notice a pattern of problems over time, that's when it's worth your attention. Request the financials, show up to next meeting, put your questions in writing, and keep a record of the responses. In Wisconsin, as a condo owner, you have a right to all of those documents. The earlier you notice something shifting, the more options you have. A building with a solvable problem and engaged owners can prevent bigger problems down the road. But a building that's been quietly declining while owners stay home is a much longer road to deal with. Let me leave you with something concrete. If you're thinking about buying a condo, request the last 2 years of meeting minutes and read them before you fall in love with the unit. Request the reserve study and find the fund percentage. Ask directly where any pending or anticipated special assessments might be. And in Wisconsin, under the Condominium Ownership Act, sellers are required to disclose that. And make sure your agent is actually reviewing those documents with you, not just forwarding them and moving on. If you already own a condo, find out when your last reserve study was completed. If it's more than 3 years old, ask the board to update it. Pull the most recent financial statements. Go to the next annual meeting. These are your rights as a condo owner, and they are your earliest warning signs if something starts to go wrong. Here's the line I want you to remember. A condo is a financial relationship with the community. And like any financial relationship, you need to understand what you're committing to before you commit to it. And you need to stay engaged long after you commit. So if you're thinking about buying or selling a home in Wisconsin or Illinois, whether that's a condo, a single family home, or anything else, check the description box on all the ways to get in touch with me. I bring the same level of research and preparation to every transaction because I think that's what actually protects people and gets them the best outcome. The link is in the description to schedule a free consultation with me, as well as my email. Most buyers never get this information until after they've already signed and closed. You could change that for someone you care about just by sending them this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn your notifications on so you never miss a video from me. Once again, I'm Hannah Garcia, and this is my channel Heartland Homes with Hannah, and thank you for watching.